Imagine working a boring, dead-end night shift, only to have the hottest girl you know suddenly demand that you become her personal pet. Jiwoo was an aimless, depressed guy working at a convenience store. His only reason to smile was Juhee, a gorgeous college student who visited every single night. He thought it was just a harmless, one-sided crush. But Juhee noticed the broad-shouldered, muscular cashier staring at her, and she saw right through his timid disguise. She isn't just a sweet customer. She has a highly specific, dangerous fetish, absolute dominance over men. She steps behind the counter, pulls him close, and offers him a secret, incredibly steamy deal. He doesn't just get a girlfriend, he gets a master. This is Jiwoo's master. A painful memory floods Kwon Jiwoo's mind. He is a boy again, sitting at his school desk while bullies pour milk over his books. They mock his silence, sneering that no one would ever come to help an orphan like him. The memory fades, leaving a residue of deep-seated pain. In the quiet of his room, the adult Jiwoo sits on his bed, his expression hollow. He picks up a small object, overwhelmed by a dark impulse, and pinches his own skin sharply to ground his spiraling thoughts. Afterwards, he lies back, staring blankly at the ceiling. A fresh bandage is on his leg, a small testament to his despair. He thinks, his eyes filled with self-loathing, hate myself. In the solitude of his room, Kwon Jiwoo lies in bed, staring into the darkness. He couldn't hold back and gave in to the familiar, heavy despair again. He admits a painful truth to the silence. Even a man with no hope left for tomorrow is still afraid of the end. An alarm pierces his bleak thoughts, a harsh summons back to his monotonous reality. Dragging himself to his part-time job, he is certain today will be just as tedious as the last. But then, a woman with striking eyes and straight black bangs steps up to his counter. A simple request feels like an impossible task as Kwon Jiwoo's anxiety surges under Juhee's cool gaze. He follows her direction for the item, but his composure completely shatters when their fingers brush during the payment. An unexpected jolt makes his hand tremble violently, and her card slips, clattering to the floor. Mortification floods him as he stammers a frantic apology, bracing for anger. But instead, she calmly picks it up, her lips curving into a subtle, knowing smile. "You must be new," she observes, her serene presence leaving Jiwoo utterly breathless. With a parting encouragement to keep up the good work, Juhee pushes through the glass door. The bell chimes, a sharp sound in the sudden silence she leaves behind. Kwon Jiwoo remains motionless, his breath caught in his throat as he clutches his chest. His heart hammers a frantic, unfamiliar rhythm against his ribs. Heat rushes to his face as he stares at the empty space she occupied just moments before, his mind struggling to comprehend the overwhelming encounter. He can only wonder what that intense feeling was. The brief tranquility shatters when the door chimes again. It's not her. An older man, flushed and unsteady, demands alcohol. Kwon Jiwoo politely explains the self-service policy, but the man explodes with rage. He throws cash at Kwon Jiwoo's face, ordering him to bring the drinks outside. Pushed beyond his limit, a quiet fury builds in Kwon Jiwoo. He follows the man out, but instead of complying, he pours the cold beverage over the man's head. Stunned, the man shoves a bottle hard into Kwon Jiwoo's chest, his voice dripping with menace. The man's voice is a low sneer as he leans in, vowing to get Kwon Jiwoo fired. His words turn venomous, taunting Kwon Jiwoo about his upbringing. The insult hits a raw nerve, a painful memory flashing in his mind. He tries to push the man's hand away, stammering for him to stop, but the aggressor shoves the shattered glass harder. Pain flares in his shoulder as the sharp edge strikes his skin. The man finally backs off, cursing as he storms into the night. Alone, Kwon Jiwoo's composure shatters. A tear escapes, then another, until silent sobs shake his frame. Just then, he sees Juhee standing nearby, her eyes wide with shock. Mortified, Kwon Jiwoo can only watch as she turns and runs away, leaving him utterly humiliated. Tears stream down Kwon Jiwoo's face as he stares into the night sky, utterly defeated. He's convinced she'll never come back after seeing him so broken, that this was the last time he would ever see her. A dark, hollow feeling settles in his chest, as if his journey could simply end right now. Suddenly, the sound of hurried footsteps breaks the silence. "Hey," a voice calls out. Kwon Jiwoo turns, his eyes wide with disbelief. Juhee rushes toward him, breathless. She holds up a bag, explaining she brought medical supplies to treat his wound. Inside the staff room, Kwon Jiwoo sits shirtless while Juhee carefully applies a bandage to his shoulder. She tells him the wound isn't as severe as she feared, but he should still see a doctor if it doesn't improve. The quiet kindness is too much, and he has to ask if she heard everything. Juhee's simple yes hangs in the air between them. He tries to dismiss the man's cruel words as nonsense, but his own resolve crumbles. Trembling, he asks what would happen if it were all true. Tears well in his eyes as he confesses everything, that he's an orphan, just like the man said. A wave of embarrassment washes over Kwon Jiwoo. He feels like a fool for taking his emotions out on her and quietly apologizes. In response, Juhee pulls him into a gentle embrace, his eyes widening in shock. She whispers that she's sorry, assuring him no one deserves such cruelty and asking him to please stop crying. He freezes, overwhelmed by a warmth he's never known before. After a moment, she pulls away and offers him a new shirt, then quietly leaves. He watches her go, completely stunned, thinking she must be an angel. Juhee walks away, but her composure crumbles the moment she finds a private space. Leaning against a cool door, she gasps for air, her body trembling with an unfamiliar, overwhelming heat. Meanwhile, in the staff room, Kwon Jiwoo is completely undone. Tears of profound relief and gratitude stream down his face. Her kindness has shattered all his walls. He whispers a quiet thank you into the stillness. The raw vulnerability in his confession seems to cross the distance, crashing over Juhee in a wave of intense, possessive feeling that leaves her breathless. Juhee sleeps soundly, her thoughts drifting to a pleasant, smiling memory of Kwon Jiwoo. But the dream sours, twisting into a different moment from her past. The warmth of an intimate scene turns cold as a cruel voice calls their closeness disgusting. Her eyes snap open with a jolt. The nightmare shatters, leaving her breathless and staring at the ceiling of her dark room. She lets out a shaky sigh, the lingering unease settling over her as she tries to ground herself, slowly wondering what time it is. The phone's soft glow shows it's 11:30. Juhee realizes she's only slept for about 2 hours, the nightmare having cut her rest short. A deep exhaustion pulls at her as she sits up, longing for just 10 more minutes in bed, but an unfinished assignment hangs over her. With a sigh, she decides to step out for a moment to clear her head. The elevator doors slide shut, encasing her in a quiet, sterile box. As her weary reflection stares back, her thoughts spiral back to the dream. It was 2 years ago, she reminds herself, so why is she still being haunted by these kinds of memories? Juhee leans against the elevator wall, her reflection staring back with exhausted eyes. She's so tired of these old feelings and troubling dreams. The very idea of romance seems pointless, meaningless to her now. With a resigned sigh, her mind pushes aside the turmoil and lands on what it is she truly craves. An image floods her thoughts, the powerful, toned physique of Kwon Jiwoo, a bright crimson ribbon secured around his neck. A soft tether rattles gently as a delicate hand takes hold. This is what she truly wants, a large, fiercely devoted companion. Her fantasy shows her hand gently pressing him down, a symbol of perfect control. Back in the elevator, a deep blush spreads across Juhee's face as she covers her mouth, overwhelmed by the raw intensity of her own desires. The bell over the convenience store door chimes softly as Juhee enters, her weary eyes scanning the brightly lit aisles. She approaches the counter, her gaze landing on the clerk. "1 pack of ease change mints, please," she says, her voice flat with fatigue. The clerk, Kwon Jiwoo, looks up and his eyes widen slightly. He manages a quiet yes before turning around to the display case. As he reaches for the items, a bead of sweat trails down his temple, and a flush creeps up his neck. Juhee watches him silently, her expression unreadable. She clarifies, "The one on the left. The blue one." Her gaze narrows as she observes his posture, completely tense, as if he's trying to make himself smaller in her presence. "No, the one next to it." Juhee corrects him, her voice steady. As Kwon Jiwoo takes her payment card, their fingers brush for just a second. He flinches as if struck, a sharp gasp escaping his lips as a furious blush spreads across his entire face. Juhee's mind registers his overly sensitive reaction to the smallest physical contact. It is in this moment, as he hands back the card he nearly dropped, that their eyes finally meet. He looks completely flustered, while her gaze remains intense and analytical. "Thanks. Have a great day," she says, turning and leaving the store as the bell chimes. Outside, she takes a moment for herself, the streetlights illuminating her calculating expression as she exhales a slow breath in the cool night air. From behind the counter, Kwon Jiwoo just stands and watches her through the glass, unable to move. Leaning against a wall in the cool evening breeze, Juhee brings her hand to her chin. A small, knowing smile plays on her face as she reflects on the convenience store clerk. She initially thought he was just cute. She corrects the thought, her mind working behind her intense gaze. To be honest, he does more than that. He truly sparks her interest. A vivid memory surfaces, explaining why their connection spiraled into something so powerful. Kwon Jiwoo pants heavily, sweat beading on his brow as a single tear escapes his eye. Beside him, Juhee lies back, breathless and flushed, realizing this passionate outcome was perhaps inevitable from the start. Lost in a private moment, Juhee lies breathless, her body trembling with a lingering warmth. She questions her own sanity, having surrendered to this overwhelming feeling more times than she can count. Her intense daydream is suddenly broken. Excuse me. Kwon Jiwoo stands nervously before her at the counter, holding out a paper bag. He stammers that he's returning the t-shirt she lent him. Pulled abruptly from her thoughts, Juhee thanks him, but he insists, his hand anxiously gripping his clothes. Changing the subject, she asks if his injury is all right now. A brilliant blush spreads across Kwon Jiwoo's face. Yes, he exclaims, eagerly pulling his collar open to show her the healed skin on his chest. With his shirt still parted, Kwon Jiwoo excitedly explains how the doctor praised him for treating his injuries so well. Juhee's gaze lingers, her mind lost as she stares at his exposed chest. She can barely hear a word he's saying, wondering if he's even aware of what he's showing her. As he continues, she simply thinks, he's cute. Snapping out of her daze, she apologizes. What did you say? Instantly flustered, Kwon Jiwoo apologizes for rambling. He clenches his hands, his voice trembling as he tries to ask her out for a meal to thank her. With his shirt still parted, Kwon Jiwoo excitedly explains that the doctor praised him for treating his injuries so well, preventing a worse infection. Juhee's gaze lingers, her mind lost as she stares at his exposed chest. She can barely hear a word he's saying, wondering if he's even aware of what he's showing her. As he continues, she simply thinks to herself, as expected, he's cute. Snapping out of her daze, she apologizes for not listening, asking, what did you say? Instantly flustered, Kwon Jiwoo stammers an apology for rambling. He clenches his hands, his voice trembling as he tries to ask her out for a meal to properly thank her, worried that he must seem pathetic. A deep blush floods Kwon Jiwoo's face as he struggles to ask her out, his heart sinking with instant regret, certain of his own foolishness. Just as he prepares for rejection, Juhee's voice cuts through his anxiety. She suggests dinner that weekend, a proposition that leaves him utterly speechless. A knowing smile plays on her lips as she assures him she knows the perfect spot. At the restaurant, the air is thick with more than just the sizzle of food. An accidental touch sends Kwon Jiwoo into a flustered panic. He quickly apologizes, offering to handle the grill himself. As they sit across from each other, Juhee watches Kwon Jiwoo with a knowing amusement. She had pegged him as gentle, but this is something more, an almost naive compliance. He's built so impressively, yet he can't meet her eyes, his voice trembling nervously as he asks what he should call her. She introduces herself as Juhee, giving him an open invitation to choose any name he's comfortable with. Kwon Jiwoo hesitates, his face flushing a deep red as he looks down. Then, with a quiet breath of surrender, he offers a single, startling word, master. Seated across from Juhee at the lively restaurant, Kwon Jiwoo's face flushes a deep red. He shifts uncomfortably, a nervous sweat beading on his skin as he tries to speak. Gripping his own arm under the table, he finally looks at her and quietly voices the question that has been on his mind, asking if he should call her master. The question hangs in the air. Juhee's light purple eyes widen in surprise, her expression frozen. She says, completely taken aback. In her momentary shock, the piece of food she was holding slips from her chopsticks and falls. A wave of pure panic crashes over Kwon Jiwoo. He sees Juhee's shocked expression and immediately regrets his forwardness. He scrambles to correct himself, anxiously suggesting more casual names, each one feeling more awkward than the last. Across from him, Juhee covers her mouth, her cheeks flushing a deep pink. She's not upset, but utterly flustered by his choice of words. After a moment, she regains her composure and tells him to simply call her Juhee. He quickly agrees, though his heart still thunders as he clasps his hands tightly beneath the table. Kwon Jiwo's face glows with a warm blush as he recalls an earlier conversation. He shyly tells Juhee that her name is beautiful and that it suits her. Juhee remembers the moment he's talking about, but she inwardly dismisses it. She hadn't really been envious. Her mind was just lost in a daydream, conjuring daring fantasies of him. Back in the restaurant, Jiwo earnestly thanks her for talking to him so often. A small smile plays on Juhee's lips as she admits to herself she only did it because watching him get flustered was so amusing. The sounds of the busy restaurant fade into a dull hum as silence settles between them. Juhee stares into the distance, lost in thought. She finds she has nothing to say, and a wave of regret washes over her. She questions why she's even here, sitting with a man she barely knows. Was she really that lonely? Her gaze falls upon Kwon Jiwo, and she wonders why she paid him so much attention. A sudden, intense image flashes through her mind. She envisions him, completely devoted, a crimson ribbon around his neck. Her fingers are intertwined with the tether, her hand resting on his chest. The startling fantasy makes her recoil inwardly. This isn't right, she thinks, deeply unsettled by her own desires. The jarring fantasy twists, and suddenly Juhee imagines herself in his place. A crimson ribbon is fastened around her neck, a long tether binding her. She quickly dismisses the exhilarating thought. It should just stay a fantasy. She shudders, the image shattering as she jolts back to reality. A soft voice breaks the silence. Excuse me. Kwon Jiwo peeks around a corner, a shy blush dusting his cheeks. Juhee's expression immediately darkens. A wave of profound disappointment washes over her. But then, a new resolve takes its place. She rises, her lips curling into a faint smile as she looks at him. Shall we get drinks? She proposes. Kwon Jiwo sits with a heavy blush, his mind reeling. He feels completely overwhelmed. Across the table, Juhee wrestles with her own thoughts, the memory of his physique replaying in her mind and stirring a potent warmth within her. Her gaze drifts to his chest, the thin fabric of his shirt barely containing his form. An intense longing to hold him washes over her. Overcome, she blames the evening out and decides she must leave. I should go home, she murmurs, starting to stand. But Kwon Jiwo abruptly rises. Wait a moment, he says, stopping her cold. Juhee's eyes widen, a blush dusting her cheeks as she stares, rendered speechless. Across the table, Kwon Jiwo's hand clutches his own thigh, his knuckles white. I'm sorry, he stammers, face burning with a deep crimson flush as he struggles to explain his body's very obvious reaction. He apologizes again, his voice a frantic whisper. Juhee reaches out, her fingers gently interlacing with his. He admits he can't go far like this. A slow, knowing smile spreads across her face. Then shall we go to my place? She purrs. The apartment door clicks shut, sealing them inside. In an instant, Kwon Jiwo loses his balance, stumbling backward and pulling Juhee down with him. He lands with a soft thud, her body pressed intimately against his. Mortified, he stammers an apology for tripping, his face burning red. But his words catch in his throat as the reality of their position overwhelms him. Juhee gazes down, a faint blush on her cheeks. You haven't calmed down at all, she observes. His heart pounds wildly as her hand moves, her fingers resting against him as she whispers. Is this because of me? Kwon Jiwo trembles beneath Juhee's weight, his face flushed a deep crimson as she leans in, her voice a low whisper. Do you want to cross the lines of intimacy with me? The question hangs in the air, charged with unspoken promises. He swallows hard, his mind racing. Juhee firmly cups his chin, her gaze sharp and demanding. Answer me, she insists. Finally, he surrenders to the overwhelming feeling. I want to do it, he breathes out, the confession raw and honest. A triumphant, knowing smile spreads across her lips as she confesses she feels the same. Juhee's gaze drifts over Kwon Jiwo's physique, her voice a low murmur. She admires his form, yet she confesses to feeling a little scared. The statement throws him completely off balance. He asks, his mind reeling. She leans in, whispering that because they don't know each other well, she has an idea. How about we try something like this? Before he can react, she deftly secures his wrists behind his back. He is left kneeling and restrained, his breath catching in his throat as a wave of confusion washes over him. A gentle touch on his skin pulls Kwon Jiwo from a daze. He focuses on the hand resting on his chest, his mind racing. How did this happen? He finds himself on the bed, propped up and completely restrained, his arms and legs securely bound. A deep blush warms his face as he stares at Juhee kneeling before him. Her expression is one of pure satisfaction as her fingers drift down to his waist. A sudden, sharp terror grips him. No, he thinks desperately, pleading aloud. Please don't, there's a scar. Juhee simply gazes at him, her expression unreadable as she asks him why. A deep, burning flush creeps up Kwon Jiwoo's neck. He stammers that he's embarrassed, desperate to hide his scars from her. But his plea is met with a soft smile. Her fingers brush against the edge of his clothes as she explains that getting closer would be difficult otherwise. Look, she commands softly. She leans in closer, challenging him to endure it. Overwhelmed by the sudden intimacy, Kwon Jiwoo's mind whites out, his heart pounding against his ribs. A hot flush of panic washes over Kwon Jiwoo. He lies completely exposed, his mind spiraling with mortification under Jihee's unwavering gaze. He desperately wants to cover himself, to hide from her, but his bound hands are useless. Juhee looks down, a low, satisfied hum escaping her lips as her eyes darken with hunger. Her touch is firm and deliberate, holding him close as she murmurs about his intense reaction, unable to calm his racing heart with both hands. Juhee moves beside him. She sits near his bound legs and begins to untie the fabric, her movements calm and deliberate. His gaze falls to the stinging red handprint on his chest. I'm sorry, he whispers, the words catching in his throat. Really? Juhee leans over Kwon Jiwoo, her long hair falling forward to hide her expression as she carefully unties the fabric binding his leg. The knot loosens, but a heavy silence hangs between them. 3 days pass. Back at the convenience store, Kwon Jiwoo stands behind the counter, a profound emptiness in his gaze. His worst fears solidify into a grim reality. Juhee hasn't visited once. The days blur into a routine of hard physical labor at a construction site, where he pushes his body to its limits under the hot sun. Though his body is spent from a long day of labor, Kwon Jiwoo finds no rest. He lies awake, staring into the darkness as his thoughts spiral. It has been 4 days. Will he ever see Juhee again? The hope dwindles with each passing hour. A cold wave of despair hits him as he confronts the truth. He has no way to contact her. A brief, warm memory flashes in his mind, instantly soured by regret. His hand clenches the sheet, his heart heavy with the feeling that this is truly the end. Kwon Jiwoo sits up in bed, clutching the fabric of his shirt. His heart hammers against his ribs, a frantic rhythm he can't control. He needs to stop thinking, to somehow escape the spiral of his own mind. His gaze lands on his desk, and a dark realization settles in. He'd forgotten for a while. He reaches for a small, heavy object. It's the easiest and most familiar way to distract himself from the pain. With a grimly determined expression, he holds the tool, his heart still thudding in his ears. His grip tightens as he prepares to use it. With a sharp clatter, Kwon Jiwoo slams the object onto his desk, turning away from the dark impulse. He scolds himself, a wave of self-loathing washing over him as he questions if he's truly about to repeat his past mistakes. Unsure of what to do, he leaves his home and wanders aimlessly through the city streets. He walks until sweat beads on his brow, the heat of the day pressing in on him. Finally, a heavy resignation settles in. He decides to go home, sleep, and then head to the convenience store for work. As Kwon Jiwoo walks with a heavy heart, determined to fall back into his mundane routine, a familiar figure stops him in his tracks. A woman with long, straight black hair waits at a crosswalk ahead. His breath hitches. Could it be Juhee? Before he can be sure, his attention snaps to a car speeding towards her, showing no sign of slowing down. Adrenaline erases all thought. He sprints forward, his body moving on pure instinct, and shoves her out of the path of danger. They collapse onto the pavement as the car rushes past. Kwon Jiwoo's breath catches in his chest as he lies atop Juhee on the hard pavement. The thought echoes in his mind. She was almost struck. A quiet groan of pain escapes her lips, bringing him back to the startling reality of their position. He stares down at her, completely flustered, unsure of what to say. "Hey, are you okay?" he manages to ask, his voice trembling. Juhee looks up at him, her wide, purple eyes filled with shock. The world around them seems to melt away, replaced by the frantic, pounding rhythm of their hearts beating together. He pushes himself off her and sits up on the sidewalk, a sharp sting drawing his attention to his leg. His pants are torn, the fabric stained red from the fresh scrapes he earned in his desperate act. Juhee sits up on the pavement, her expression shifting from shock to deep concern. Let's treat that first, she insists, her gaze fixed on the scrape on Kwon Jiwoo's leg. Soon, they are inside her apartment. He sits stiffly on the sofa, explaining that all the nearby clinics are closed. While Juhee prepares a first aid kit, she quietly apologizes, assuming he didn't want to return to her home. Her words confuse him. Why would you say that, he wonders. He realizes she apologized back then, too, and a single, pressing question echoes in his mind. Why? Juhee's voice is soft, but direct. Hey, I think you need to remove your ruined clothes. Kwon Jiwoo's head snaps up, his eyes wide with disbelief as a deep blush creeps across his face. He stammers, unable to form a coherent response before his gaze drops to the floor in embarrassment. As she opens the first aid kit, she notes his hesitation, figuring he must be uncomfortable. Understanding dawns on her face. I'll bring you a blanket, she offers gently. He looks down at his clasped hands, managing only a quiet yes. Thank you. Juhee gently presses the final bandage onto Kwon Jiwoo's knee. A subtle blush colors his cheeks as he finishes cleaning himself, his gaze cast downward. He quietly announces he's all done and will tidy up. Juhee watches him, a complex expression on her face as she thinks. She walks over with a first aid kit, setting it down before him. A quiet thank you leaves her lips, but her inner thoughts are sharp and critical, questioning his gratitude and pondering the limits of his foolishness for ending up in her care. A deep blush spreads across Kwon Jiwoo's face as he tries to bring up what happened that day. Juhee speaks first, her back to him, offering an apology for being so irresponsible. She says she worried it would be awkward for him, but her private thoughts reveal the truth. She was the one who felt uncomfortable. She laments that this is simply who she is, and it isn't great. Hearing this, Kwon Jiwoo becomes flustered, quickly insisting it's not like that at all. He was just surprised. Juhee looks down, telling him he has no need to apologize. Kwon Jiwoo looks away, a faint blush dusting his cheeks as he quietly presumes Juhee must not have enjoyed their time together. His own hands fidget in his lap as his thoughts race, questioning the very idea. Did not like it. If he had to choose, the answer was obvious. Deeply flustered, he looks down and stammers that he didn't mind it at all. Juhee stands across from him, her voice cutting through the heavy silence. She asks how that could be true, reminding him that he cried while saying he was scared. Mortified, Kwon Jiwoo hides his face, trying to explain that he felt ridiculous, blaming his tears on intoxication and a hazy memory. Kwon Jiwoo keeps his face hidden, his voice muffled as he explains his growing worry. She hasn't come to the store since that day, and with no way to contact her, he was left to wonder. He finally lowers his hands, his eyes wide with a fragile hope as he asks if he will ever be able to see her again. Suddenly, Juhee leans in, her face just inches from his. He flinches back, startled by her intensity. Her sharp gaze studies his vulnerable expression. After a moment, she pulls away. Just so there's no misunderstanding, she states coolly. I'm not planning on dating anyone. The hope in Kwon Jiwoo's chest withers as Juhee flatly states she isn't looking for a boyfriend. She leans over him, her eyes sharp and possessive as her hand drifts through his hair. What she needs, she declares with chilling certainty, is a devoted companion. She admits that even now, she's more curious about whether the handprint she left on his chest is still there. A sly, unsettling smile plays on her lips as she asks if that's creepy, before suggesting they shouldn't get involved with each other anymore and he should rest. Juhee rises from the bed, her expression unreadable as she announces she will be waiting outside. Just as she turns to leave, a hand gently closes around hers, stopping her mid-stride. Kwon Jiwoo sits with his head bowed, his face a deep shade of crimson. His heart pounds against his ribs, a frantic rhythm of desperation and hope. Trembling, his other hand clutches the fabric of his t-shirt. With a surge of resolve, he lifts it, revealing the faint, hand-shaped mark still blooming on his chest. He finally meets her gaze, asking if maybe he could be her loyal companion. Juhee stands on her university campus with a friend who sighs with envy that Juhee's exams are almost over. Juhee clarifies she still has one required elective left in 2 days. Deciding she should head out, she gives a small smile and a wave, wishing her friend good luck. As she turns and walks away, her steps are light and unburdened. A serene, contented expression graces her features. Her friend watches her go, a single thought echoing in her mind. Juhee looks so incredibly happy right now. A soft chime breaks the silence, and the door to Juhee's apartment swings open. She greets him with a calm, knowing smile, asking if he's arrived. Before her stands Jiwoo, a nervous blush warming his features as he manages a simple hello. She explains her final exams kept her away, and a delicate blossom of hope blooms in his chest. With her now on vacation, he dares to dream they might see each other more. His heart flutters as he mentions a package that just arrived. A curious glint appears in Juhee's eyes as she asks what it contains. A nervous heat rises in Jiwoo's chest as he explains the package. It contains a specialized device for his personal training, just as she instructed. A deep blush colors his features as he confirms it's for him, a task she had given him. Juhee's lips curve into a pleased smile. She praises him, calling him a good boy for following her orders so well. Taking the device from its box, she presses it gently against him. From now on, she says, her voice a low command. We're using this, too. He swallows, completely captivated. Juhee's voice is a calm whisper as she asks if he's ready. Jiwoo can only manage a shaky yes in response. He lies face down on the bed, his body rigid with anticipation, his face flushed. With a gentle touch, she begins, asking how it feels and if it's uncomfortable. He trembles, unable to form a clear answer. Sensing his tension, Juhee decides to press on, exploring further. A sharp gasp escapes Jiwoo's lips as an unfamiliar, overwhelming sensation floods his senses, stirring a strange feeling deep inside. Juhee's voice is soft as she poses a curious question about a different kind of devotion, her gaze unwavering. Blushing, Jiwoo turns his head away, stammering a denial into the pillow. He understood the deeper meaning when she said she wanted a loyal pet, but he never imagined this. She thoughtfully hums and offers a distraction. Want to watch a movie? Later, they sit together on the couch, the glow of the television lighting the dim room. While Juhee seems relaxed, Jiwoo lies with his head on a pillow, staring blankly ahead, a profound question echoing in his thoughts. I wonder what I am doing. As Jiwoo lies on the couch, his mind spins with anxious thoughts. If this is truly meant to be an intimate act, shouldn't he be reacting somehow? He fears that if he just lies still, Juhee will get bored, but he has no idea what to do. His repetitive worries fade as he becomes engrossed in the surprisingly good movie on screen. Lost in the film's plot, a sudden movement from the floor jolts him. He turns, startled, to find Juhee has turned around completely. She sits there, just looking at him, her gaze intense and unreadable. A sudden twitch jolts Jiwoo, pulling his attention from the movie. His face flushes with heat as he turns to Juhee, hesitantly asking if the device she used is supposed to move or vibrate in some way. She just stares back, her expression unreadable as she flatly tells him no, it's nothing special. He tries to brush it off as a mistake, but the thought has taken root. The movie fades into the background as his awareness fixates on the intense, distracting sensation. Apologizing again, he realizes with a jolt that this feeling isn't a mistake. A deep blush spreads across Jiwoo's face as he stammers, insisting that he thinks the device is actually moving. Juhee simply turns her head, calmly explaining that it's not the item itself. She clarifies that what he's feeling is just a natural reaction from his own body. The realization floods his mind. This is all him. A sudden, intense pulse courses through him, and he clenches his shirt, a bead of sweat tracing a line down his neck. It happens again, and his head swims with a dizzying rush he just can't comprehend. A strange, undeniable pulse courses through Jiwoo. He thinks it's weird, but his body trembles with the new sensation. Acting on pure instinct, his hand darts out, grabbing Juhee's wrist with surprising strength. She looks down, her expression unreadable as she asks what he's doing. He's overwhelmed, face flushed and breath hitched, unable to form words. A subtle shift in Juhee's eyes reveals her understanding. Leaning over him, she softly declares that it seems they can't keep watching the movie anymore. Her gaze drifts lower as she notes the visible evidence of his body's overwhelming response. Juhee leans over Jiwoo, her hand gently covering his mouth as his entire body trembles. With a knowing glint in her eyes, she whispers a teasing question, asking if he wants her to comfort him there. He can only stare, his face flushed and his mind racing. Just as quickly, she pulls back with a light laugh, sweetly denying his unspoken plea. She explains that it would only lessen the other sensations he's feeling. Still, seeing his state, she concedes she feels a bit bad. So, she offers a compromise, leaning in close once more. Her fingers find his chest, gripping and twisting the fabric of his shirt right over his heart, sending a sharp, new jolt through him. A sharp jolt shoots through Kwon Jiwoo as Juhee's fingers tighten their grip. Kwon Jiwoo groans, completely spent and dazed, his breath catching in ragged pants. Standing at the doorway, Juhee turns with a fond smile, telling him she had fun and to be careful on his way home. The door clicks shut, leaving Kwon Jiwoo alone with his thoughts. A deep blush floods his cheeks as he stammers in agreement, admitting he had fun too. After he leaves, Juhee sits on the bed, a soft, almost weary laugh escaping her as she muses on her own performance. Overwhelmed, Kwon Jiwoo buries his face in his hands, a new resolve forming in the haze of passion. He wonders if he can get better for her. In her room, Juhee stretches, trying to shake off the lingering intensity. She lies in bed, staring blankly at the ceiling, lost in thought. Juhee's thoughts drift as she lies alone in her bed. She reflects that she fully expected him to run away from her intensity. After all, what she needs is a devoted companion, a role she believes would be too strange for just anyone. But a slow, knowing smile spreads across her face. It seems she's found a loyal follower that she likes. A wave of pure excitement washes over her, making her giddy beneath the covers. Recalling his complete surrender, her expression softens into quiet contemplation. Does it really matter? She wonders, staring into the darkness. At the construction site, Kwon Jiwoo's co-workers murmur amongst themselves, noting his frequent disappearances to the restroom again. They decide it's best to just leave him be. Hidden away, Jiwoo is overcome, his face burning with a persistent flush. His daily life has become a constant, difficult struggle. He desperately wonders why this keeps happening to him, whether he's eating, sleeping, or even now, at work. Then, her face flashes in his mind. Juhee, a knowing and intoxicating smile on her lips. He realizes she is the cause. She keeps invading his thoughts. Kwon Jiwoo finds himself overwhelmed again, convinced it's futile to resist the feeling that keeps returning. He's never been like this in his life, so completely consumed by a single thought. His mind is full of one person, her name a desperate whisper on his lips as the world melts away. Juhee. The image of his torment gives way to another scene entirely. Juhee sits calmly, looking down at her trembling hand. Examining the overwhelming reaction there, she wonders aloud with a knowing, curious expression. So that's why he reacted that way? Juhee sits before Kwon Jiwoo, her voice cutting through the heavy air as she asks a very personal question about his activities over the last 3 days. His face burns a deep crimson, and he can only stammer in response. She playfully guesses a number, realizing his silence means it's even higher. Overwhelmed with shame, Jiwoo apologizes. Juhee calmly dismisses his apology, calling it a test. Yet, she seizes the opening. Since he believes he did something wrong, she declares he must face the consequences. A sly smile plays on her lips as she pats the bed beside her. "Why are you just watching?" she murmurs, her gaze intoxicating. "You should come lie down." Kwon Jiwoo nervously lies face down on the bed as instructed. Juhee settles onto him, her weight a heavy, thrilling presence. He tenses his muscles, determined to hold his position. Her voice, calm and measured, cuts through the silence as she asks him to decide the number of disciplinary marks he will receive. Suddenly, a soft giggle escapes her. Confused by the break in her dominant demeanor, Jiwoo looks back. Juhee smiles. Explaining the situation reminds her of being a child, facing a teacher's discipline. "I always pretended it didn't bother me," she admits, "but I was so scared." A nostalgic smile graces Juhee's lips. She sees a reflection of her own past in his anxious posture, telling him, "Right now, Jiwoo, you look exactly like how I was back then." He hesitantly asks if she was ever a troublemaker, and she laughs, admitting she was once out of control. The tender moment passes. When he asks what number she would choose for discipline, she confidently answers 10. Following her lead, Jiwoo agrees to the same number. "Sounds good," Juhee confirms, adding a final, thrilling condition. He must count each one aloud, or they start over. Juhee's hand meets its mark with a sharp sting. 1. Jiwoo counts, his voice tight. The strikes come in a steady rhythm. 2. 3. As he endures, his mind drifts back to their conversation, and he wonders about her childhood, imagining she grew up loved, becoming the angel he sees. 4. He groans, a flush creeping up his neck. But then doubt settles in. He barely knows the real Juhee. A pained gasp escapes him. 6. He realizes one undeniable truth. The stinging sensation she delivers is becoming something else entirely, an intoxicating thrill. Juhee's hand connects again. S7. Jiwoo gasps, a surprising warmth spreading through him despite the sting. He's shocked by his body's eager response. With the 8th strike, his legs threaten to give out. E8. He groans, his voice barely a whisper. By 9, he's lost in a dizzying haze, aware only of the stinging sensation and his hands brushing her skin. Juhee smirks, satisfied with his reaction, before delivering the final impact. T10. He pants, trembling. Just as relief begins to set in, she adds one last command. It's over. Now, say thank you. Trembling from the lingering sensations, Jiwoo offers a grateful, choked whisper. Thank you. Juhee acknowledges his obedience and pulls him close. For a moment, she issues a new, quiet command. He has been a good boy, so he is not to seek his own comfort unless she allows it. Yes, master, he breathes, his submission absolute. Later, Juhee lies in bed, stretching languidly as she reflects on the day. She examines her stinging, reddened palm, a satisfied smile on her face. Fantasies of dominating someone are one thing, but now that she has a willing partner, she finds herself wondering, what should they do next? The story continued with intense emotion, the scene shifting as events unfolded. A young woman stares at her phone, her thoughts a storm of annoyance. She feels cornered by an invitation she can no longer refuse and reluctantly types out an agreement. Elsewhere, Juhee glances at her own screen. A quiet "ah" escapes her lips, followed by a spark of inspiration. A perfect idea suddenly dawns on her. The scene shifts to a bright Friday afternoon. Jiwoo waits on a bustling street corner when a soft voice calls his name. He turns to see Juhee waving. She approaches, and he is left breathless. Dressed in a delicate white dress, her hair elegantly braided, she seems to glow. She gives him a gentle smile and asks, "Did you wait too long?" It begins as just another normal day for Juhee. At her desk, she stretches wearily, the pressure of graduation requirements weighing on her mind. Her phone chimes with a message from a friend, predictably changing their plans for tomorrow. Juhee sighs, already knowing how this will play out. Later, she stands on a balcony under the dark sky, trying to find a moment of peace. A knowing smirk plays on her lips as she anticipates another, inevitable text from her flaky friend. But as she glances at her screen, her expression shatters. Her eyes widen in shock at a different notification, a message from her sister. A chilling regret courses through her. If only she hadn't seen it. The words from her sister pierce the quiet night, questioning her long absence from home. This sudden message, after months of silence, steals her peace entirely. Sleep refuses to come. Juhee tosses in bed, her mind racing with a familiar storm of useless thoughts that often keep her awake. She knows a familiar remedy, a private moment of release that usually helps her find rest. But as the clock ticks past 3 in the morning, a deep unease settles in her heart. She knows tonight is different. The usual comfort may not be enough. Juhee sits up in bed, wide awake. She's exhausted, but sleep remains just out of reach. The idea of going for a run is tempting, but she dismisses it. It's far too late for that. Lying back down, her mind replays the words from her sister, each one a sharp jab. A single tear escapes and slides down her cheek. You should mind your own business, she thinks, her jaw tight with resentment. The silent plea turns into a scream in her head, begging her sister to stop worrying and just take care of herself. She tosses and turns, finding no peace. Suddenly, her phone erupts, buzzing violently on the nightstand. The 9 a.m. alarm glares at her, signaling the start of a day she has had no rest for. Groggily, Juhee's hand finds her phone and taps the screen, silencing the shrill alarm. I barely slept, she thinks, her body aching with exhaustion. Despite her fatigue, she meets Jiwoo later that day. She waves, offering a soft smile. Jiwoo, I'm here. Have you been waiting long? He stands frozen, his cheeks flushing a deep red. She's a vision in a delicate white dress, her hair braided perfectly. Stuttering that he just arrived, his mind reels. She looks like a princess. In his simple clothes, he feels like a beggar standing before her. Juhee had the entire day mapped out. A perfect plan, starting with a trip to a unique kind of store with Jiwoo, followed by a later meeting. But in an instant, that perfect plan shatters. Her phone lights up with a text. It's an apology from the person she was supposed to meet, canceling just 2 hours before. They forgot about something else, asking to reschedule for next Friday. Juhee's eyes go wide, her pupils shrinking in disbelief. A tremor runs through her hands as she stares at the screen. She chose the time, the place, and even told Juhee what to wear. A slow, simmering anger begins to build within her. Normally, she might let it go, but this time, she can't control the fury rising in her chest. Kwon Jiwoo notices the dark shadow that has fallen over Juhee's expression. He cautiously asks if something is wrong. Forcing a smile, she dismisses his concern, but her mind is a storm of irritation, plotting how to get back at the one who ruined her plans. Their day hits another wall as they arrive at the shop. A simple note is taped to the glass door, opening late today. Juhee's frustration deepens. Seeing her dismay, Kwon Jiwoo apologizes, blaming himself for not calling first. Juhee turns to him, utterly bewildered by his apology. Juhee's frustration with Kwon Jiwoo simmers. His meek apology feels like the bare minimum, and she thinks he's acting like a fool. Cutting through the awkwardness, she directly asks if he's busy. Stunned, he can only stammer a question in response. She explains that her earlier meeting was canceled, leaving her afternoon unexpectedly free. Since they have time to wait, she asks if he would like to spend the day with her. A blush spreads across Kwon Jiwoo's face as he eagerly agrees. He leads her to a clothing store, shyly admitting he wants to find something nice. Inside the clothing store, Kwon Jiwoo looks away shyly, admitting he doesn't usually buy clothes and has no idea what to pick. A knowing smile touches Juhee's lips as she reassures him, promising to choose something for him. After he disappears into the fitting room, he steps out in a sleek, all-black outfit, looking deeply uncertain. "It looks weird, right?" he asks, his shoulders slumping forward. Juhee stares at him for a long, silent moment. Suddenly, she steps forward, grabbing him and forcefully pulling his shoulders back. "Straighten your shoulders," she commands. "Your body looks so good, it's a shame to slouch." The unexpected touch and direct praise send a jolt through Kwon Jiwoo, and heat floods his cheeks. A dizzying heat floods Kwon Jiwoo's face as he stands perfectly still, her praise echoing in his ears. Peeking from behind his broad shoulder, Juhee smiles, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "It looks really good on you," she says, her voice a soft, compelling murmur. "Aren't you going to buy it?" Overwhelmed, he can only stammer a flustered agreement. But Juhee is already reconsidering, thinking aloud that maybe the outfit is a bit too flashy for him. She quickly dismisses her own doubt before deciding something more neutral would suit him better. As they browse a new store filled with cute items, Juhee smiles and tells Kwon Jiwoo to look at whatever he wants while she checks something out. He agrees, but the moment she turns away, his composure shatters. A deep blush creeps up his neck as he swallows hard, admitting to himself he's been barely holding it together since the clothing store. The feeling is overwhelming. He recalls Juhee's command not to seek his own comfort without permission, a rule he has followed diligently. But just being near her, letting his guard down for even a moment, makes his clothes feel impossibly tight. Just then, she calls out, "Jiwoo, come over here for a second." Panic flares in his eyes. He can't possibly go to her like this. Desperate, he grits his teeth and strikes his own thigh, again and again, trying to force the intense physical reaction down. "Go away. Go away," he mutters through clenched teeth, his face a mask of strain. Inside a store, Juhee gestures to a display of items on the counter. She tells Kwon Jiwoo that she is picking an outfit and wants him to choose one that he likes. Jiwoo's mind goes blank, completely overwhelmed by the request. He honestly has no idea what anything is. His hand trembles slightly as he points to a small, unassuming box, figuring it's the simplest choice. "Then, this one?" he asks hesitantly. A small, knowing smile plays on Juhee's lips. "Sounds good," she chirps, her mood bright as she continues her shopping. Kwon Jiwoo's mind is a nervous blank as he stands beside Juhee, a shopping bag clutched in his hand. A faint blush colors his cheeks as he wonders what they'll do now. A small, knowing smile plays on Juhee's lips as she announces she has another place in mind. Soon, they sit in a bright cafe, a towering dessert of shaved ice and peaches between them. The sweet atmosphere is pierced by a tense silence. Jiwoo's heart hammers in his chest. He has absolutely nothing to say, a painful sense of déjà vu washing over him. Juhee calmly brings a spoonful of dessert to her lips, internally deciding there's no point overthinking the silence. To her, he's just a stranger indulging her hobby. Breaking the quiet, she asks Kwon Jiwoo his age. His hand trembles as he answers, flustered, 28. The news surprises her. She's only 24. A deep blush colors Jiwoo's neck as he mumbles about feeling old. But Juhee's gaze sharpens, analyzing him. It's not that he looks young, it's his sharp, manly features. A new thought surfaces. He's actually kind of attractive. A memory flashes through Juhee's mind of Kwon Jiwoo looking flushed and vulnerable. She'd always found him cute, but seeing him sitting there, his shirt stretched tightly across his muscular frame, a new thought solidifies. He's not just cute, he's undeniably attractive. His flustered reactions are exactly what drew her in. She watches him squirm before casually noting that since he's 28, he's her appa. The word hangs in the air, striking Kwon Jiwoo with the force of a physical blow. He stares, utterly stunned. Attempting to recover, he explains this is his first time trying such a dessert. He'd only had simple shaved ice back at the orphanage. Juhee's teasing expression instantly vanishes, replaced by wide-eyed surprise. A wave of hot panic washes over Kwon Jiwoo. He's certain he said something wrong, that his careless rambling has shattered the delicate mood between them. Embarrassment burns through him. Across the table, Juhee's teasing expression has completely evaporated, replaced by wide-eyed, silent shock. The air grows thick and heavy. Desperate to fix his mistake, Kwon Jiwoo's mind races, frantically searching for a new topic, anything at all, to shift the focus back to her and escape the sudden, suffocating quiet he created. Desperate to escape the suffocating silence, Kwon Jiwoo quickly asks Juhee if she prefers soft or crunchy peaches. To his relief, she launches into a surprisingly passionate explanation. She reveals that soft peaches are one of her absolute favorite foods, but her inability to peel them means she rarely gets to enjoy them. Kwon Jiwoo rests his chin in his hand, a warm blush spreading across his cheeks. He is completely captivated, thinking how adorable she is when she's so serious about fruit. This simple, honest conversation feels incredibly precious. The feeling lingers as they later walk under a warm, pink sky. Juhee smiles, teasingly asking if this means he's never dated anyone either. Kwon Jiwoo's face flushes with heat. He stammers, feeling the sharp sting of insecurity as he admits he's never dated. He apologizes for his tense reaction, explaining that he thought she was making fun of him and his lack of experience. Juhee looks at him, a playful glint in her eyes, and bluntly confirms she was, in fact, teasing him. The admission strikes Kwon Jiwoo like a bolt of lightning. His eyes widen in shock, and a deeper blush spreads across his entire face, rendering him speechless. Seeing his utterly flustered state, Juhee can't suppress a soft laugh, apologizing through her bright, amused smile. Juhee admits his flustered reaction was just too funny. But as Kwon Jiwoo watches her, the sting of embarrassment vanishes, replaced by a profound warmth. He sees her bright, genuine smile, and a contented expression softens his own features. A revelation settles in his heart. She can tease him as much as she wants. His pleasant day shatters when Juhee checks her phone and suggests they should head home. Disappointment hits Kwon Jiwoo like a physical blow. He stammers for her to get home safely, only for her to turn back, puzzled by his awkward farewell. Just as disappointment sets in, Juhee mentions they live in the same neighborhood and suggests they go home together. Hope surges back into Kwon Jiwoo's heart. He agrees, a blissful smile on his face as he thinks to himself that this was truly the best day ever. Their idyllic mood, however, is shattered by the reality of a rush-hour subway. As the crowd pushes forward, Kwon Jiwoo instinctively places his arm against the wall, creating a protective space for Juhee. But a sudden, forceful shove presses them tightly together, leaving him completely flustered. The constant jolting of the train presses them impossibly closer. An overwhelming heat floods Kwon Jiwoo as Juhee's body rubs against his with every movement. He panics, his mind racing. This is the worst place for this to be happening, surrounded by strangers. Mortified, he glances away, certain he must be creeping her out. Just as shame consumes him, a soft hand touches his back. His eyes widen in confusion. Before he can react, Juhee's fingers slide down, slipping just under the hem of his clothes, a shockingly bold and intimate touch that short-circuits his brain. The subway car rattles, and Kwon Jiwoo presses his hand against the window, his body tense. A sudden, cold sensation makes him look down in a panic. His clothes are in disarray, his deeply flustered state fully exposed. He knows he should fix this, but a desperate, shaky breath escapes his lips. His greatest fear surfaces. What if someone sees? His gaze darts around until he sees Juhee positioned perfectly in front of him. A powerful jolt runs through his body as her touch finds him, and he throws his head back, completely overwhelmed by her bold actions. Kwon Jiwoo trembles, his body slick with a nervous sweat. The world blurs around him as all his senses zero in on Juhee. He fixates on the pale, delicate skin of her nape and breathes in her sweet scent, which fills his head completely. Her touch is almost impossibly light, yet it sends his mind into a dizzying spiral. The packed subway car presses in on all sides, and he feels like he can't breathe. Trapped between the risk of discovery and overwhelming sensation, Kwon Jiwoo struggles to form a single clear thought. The train's automated voice announces the next stop, but Kwon Jiwoo can't focus. He's utterly powerless, his face flushed and slick with sweat as he gasps for breath. At this rate, he knows he'll lose what little control he has left. A new announcement sends a jolt of pure panic through him. The doors will open now. On the right side. His eyes fly wide with terror. That's his side. If they open now. The thought is cut short as an unstoppable wave of sensation crashes over him, and his body finally gives in. No, 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 his mind screams. The doors lurch open with a heavy thud, revealing the crowded platform just inches away. A wave of commuters surges from the open doors, knocking Kwon Jiwoo and Juhee to the platform floor. He trembles uncontrollably on his hands and knees, his face burning with shame as he scrambles to gather their things. His mind races, replaying the sheer panic of barely fixing his clothes in time. This isn't right. What if someone had seen? The fear of what just happened being perceived as a crime consumes him. From the floor beside him, Juhee giggles softly. What? Are you surprised? She asks, her smile full of mischief as she reminds him he gave her permission to tease him. A fresh wave of dread washes over Jiwoo. If she plays around like that again, he knows he seriously won't be able to handle it. Kwon Jiwoo's voice trembles as he calls out her name. On the cold platform floor, Juhee looks unusually fragile, her breath catching in her throat as she tries to recover. He kneels to help gather her things, his heart aching with concern. But then, her hand gently covers his, a silent command passing between them. The world blurs, and moments later, the heavy sound of a lock echoes in a small, private space. Inside the restroom stall, Juhee settles onto his lap, her proximity stealing the air from his lungs, reigniting the intense connection between them. Kwon Jiwoo's heart hammers against his ribs, his face burning red as he looks up at Juhee, completely lost. She leans in, pressing a hand firmly over his mouth to silence him. Be quiet, she whispers, her voice a low command. Someone might come. Her gaze is sharp as she tells him to get the small box from their shopping bag. His eyes widen, his mind reeling. He stammers, thinking those are only for when a couple crosses the ultimate line. Ignoring him, Juhee shifts, her movements purposeful. Her eyes lock onto his, her expression demanding. Hurry, she insists, and his trembling hand reaches to obey. Kwon Jiwoo's hand trembles uncontrollably, his fingers slipping uselessly against the small, delicate package. His palms are slick with sweat, and he can't get a grip. As it falls from his clumsy grasp, Juhee's hand darts out and catches it with ease. She brings it to her lips, tearing the corner with her teeth. Her gaze is heavy, her voice low and absolute. Undo your clothes, she commands. A violent shiver racks Kwon Jiwoo's entire body, so powerful his teeth begin to chatter, an audible clacking sound filling the tense silence of the stall. Kwon Jiwoo's mind reels. Juhee's games always start out of nowhere, but this time, it feels different. A strange, potent heat washes over him as his hands pull at his own shirt, his skin slick with sweat. Juhee's breath is heavy as she issues her next command. Hold it, she says, her voice low. With both hands, he feels a palpable intensity from her, something far more powerful than usual. He wonders if he's just imagining it, but as their connection deepens, the look of raw, overwhelming feeling on her face confirms it. Juhee lets out a sharp, shaky breath, her own hand clenching into a tight fist. Kwon Jiwoo's eyes fly wide with shock, a guttural groan escaping him as an incredible pressure overwhelms his senses. He clutches her tightly, gasping for air as if he's been struck. The feeling is completely alien, a powerful jolt that he can't comprehend. Confusion wars with a strange new warmth spreading through him. He doesn't understand it, but as the intense sensation settles, Kwon Jiwoo realizes with a shiver that it feels unexpectedly, undeniably good. Kwon Jiwoo's world dissolves into a haze of pure sensation. He feels like he's melting, completely overwhelmed as tears stream down his flushed cheeks. His body trembles violently, teetering on the very edge of a powerful release. "I think I'm gonna," he gasps out, his voice choked with emotion. Suddenly, Juhee's hand firmly cups his chin, her grip grounding him. Her voice slices through his delirium, low and absolute. "Don't you dare find your relief before I say so," she commands. She leans in closer, her own breath heavy, and adds a dark promise. "If you reach your peak before me, I'll discipline you with something you'll never forget." Jiwoo recalls the day with a deep sense of embarrassment. Everything felt clumsy and wrong. He remembers holding up a shirt in the store, his face flushing under Juhee's amused giggles. Later, a simple slip of his spoon sends food tumbling onto the table, and he sees her cover her mouth, trying to hide another laugh. It was just one of those days where she seemed to find his every misstep endearing. As the evening light paints the sky in soft pink hues, his expression shifts. A warm smile plays on his lips. "So," he says, his voice steady, "you can tease me all you want." Juhee looks up, caught off guard by his sudden and willing vulnerability. A warm blush dusts Juhee's cheeks as the sun paints the sky in soft pink hues. She glances at Jiwoo, her voice low. "Should we head home?" she asks, a silent understanding passing between them. The train car rattles, pushing them close in the evening crowd. Jiwoo surrounds her, placing a steadying hand on the wall next to her head. His proximity is overwhelming, a wall of warmth and strength that cocoons her from the world. As his words echo in her mind, she looks down, feeling the intense connection. She wants everything. His commanding presence, his pure heart. She wants all of him. A quiet confession echoes in Juhee's mind. She admits to herself that his surrender awakens a deep, undeniable part of her. Alone in a secluded hallway, she presses Jiwoo against the wall, her voice a low command. He is not to lose control before she allows it, or there will be consequences. Tears of desperation stream down Jiwoo's face as he trembles under her touch. "I promise," he gasps. "Without your explicit permission, I swear." His complete vulnerability unleashes her own hidden passions. She moves with him, their bond deepening in the confined space. Juhee's breath hitches, a soft curse escaping her lips as the moment consumes her. Her mind flashes back to her initial thoughts about him. She told herself she didn't need to know him and never planned to. Tears streak down Jiwoo's flushed face as he gasps her name, completely overwhelmed. Juhee adjusts her clothes and moves to the doorway. She glances back, telling Jiwoo that since no one is around, she will head out first. She hesitates, a flicker of softness in her eyes. She adds that since she left early, he doesn't need to worry about any reprimand. With a final, quiet, "Get home safe," she slips out, the lock clicking behind her. Jiwoo sits alone in the sudden silence, his shirt hanging from one shoulder. He stares blankly ahead, his face flushed and his mind reeling from the overwhelming intensity. Jiwoo lies in bed, his thoughts drifting to the past. He remembers always trying to make himself smaller, to disappear, after hearing classmates complain about his large frame. It was the only way he felt comfortable, to simply not stand out. That was how he had always lived. But then, Juhee's voice cuts through the quiet memory. She gently tells him to straighten his back. A warm blush spreads across his face as he recalls her next words, that it was a shame to keep such a nice posture slouched over. Her unexpected praise makes his heart pound. To Jiwoo, her attention feels like a precious gift. He lies in bed, his thoughts drifting as he wonders what Juhee truly thinks of him. An image of her bright, warm smile flashes in his mind, quickly followed by a much more heated memory. He recalls the overwhelming sensation of their intense embrace, their connection deepening in a haze of shared breath. The memory is so vivid that a fresh wave of heat floods his cheeks. He flops back onto the pillow, a hopeful thought taking root. Maybe she feels the same way he does. A message from Juhee lights up Jiwoo's phone, inviting him over. He arrives a few minutes early, his heart pounding with an unexplained nervousness. Standing outside her door, he smooths down the new shirt they picked out together. A deep blush warms his cheeks as he recalls her telling him how good he looked in it. Lost in the memory, he takes a step forward and walks right into the door. It swings open instantly, revealing Juhee, who asks if he's okay. Rubbing his head, a flustered Jiwoo explains he just arrived. Juhee's voice is calm as she asks if he was waiting, telling him he should come inside. The casual tone deflates Jiwoo instantly. A wave of disappointment washes over him as his shoulders slump. He wonders if their profound connection meant nothing to her, just a passing hobby. Just as he's lost in doubt, Juhee tells him to straighten his shoulders, repeating her earlier compliment about his impressive build. Realization hits him like a lightning bolt. She remembered. A deep blush floods his face as he snaps upright, a flustered denial escaping him. As Jiwoo puffs out his chest, a button springs loose from his shirt, the fabric parting to reveal the strength beneath. A moment of stunned silence hangs in the air before Juhee covers her mouth, a small laugh escaping her lips. Seriously, she chuckles, waving him closer. Come sit, I'll fix it for you. His face burns with embarrassment, but he follows her to the edge of the room. Juhee grabs a small sewing kit and settles in front of him, her proximity sending a jolt through his entire body. The air grows thick and warm as she concentrates on her task. Jiwoo tries to calm his racing heart, silently reciting lyrics to find some inner peace, but the heat in the room is suffocating. Juhee holds the needle but makes no move to sew. Instead, her gaze remains fixed on his chest, her expression unreadable and intense. He swallows hard, cautiously asking her name. But he quickly says it's nothing when she looks up. The silence stretches again before she finally speaks, her voice low. She asks what he'd think about leaving a permanent mark, and a jolt runs through him as a surprising image flashes through his mind. Jiwoo, his face flushed, asks if she means marks on his ears. Juhee's lips curve into a small smile. She explains they can go anywhere, her hand gently moving to rest against his heart. For example here, she asks softly. He flinches, his entire body going rigid with surprise. Juhee reassures him she won't really do it, but then her playful gaze drifts to the needle in her hand. As she brings the slight pressure closer, Jiwoo struggles. Stop, she warns, her voice low. You could get hurt. Jiwoo jolts, his face flushing a deep crimson as the object presses gently against him. A hot sting radiates through him, and he asks what she's doing, his voice trembling. The sensation is both startling and intense. Juhee pulls away and settles close, a playful smile on her lips. She explains that she loves his reactions, especially how deeply he feels everything. Leaning in close, her breath warm against his skin, she whispers, asking if the thrill excites him too. He breathlessly insists it doesn't, that it's too much. She simply raises a brow. No. Juhee laughs softly, teasing that his composure might completely shatter at this rate. She asks if, even so, he doesn't feel the sensation through his entire being. Before Jiwoo can respond, she leans down, her lips pressing warmly against his sensitive skin. He gasps, his body arching from the sudden, overwhelming feeling. Pulling back, Juhee notices a slight reaction and apologizes, thinking she went too far. But Jiwoo pants, covering his flushed face. He breathlessly admits he feels it so deeply, whispering that he's going to lose his mind if she continues. A faint, knowing smile plays on Juhee's lips. She teases him, asking why he's only admitting it now, adding it would have been better to be honest from the start. As Jiwoo sits with his shirt open, his face flushed red, she moves behind him. She tells him he needs more confidence. Walking deliberately around to face him, she wraps her arms around his shoulders and gently lifts his chin, making him meet her gaze. From now on, don't look away, she commands softly. Leaning in, her breath warm against his ear, she promises. If you do well, I'll give you a special prize. Juhee holds Jiwoo's flushed face, her gaze intense. She tells him not to look away, promising a reward if he does well. Her hand trails down his side, her touch firm as she draws his attention. She leans in, whispering how worked up he is, and her finger traces a line over his collarbone. His breath catches, and he asks about the reward. His mind flashes to his past discipline, a memory of sharp, stinging heat of her correction. The intense sensation bloomed into a deep ache, leaving him overwhelmed yet strangely thrilled. Jiwoo's breath catches, his face burning as he admits to himself that her discipline, it felt good. A soft, knowing voice whispers from behind him. Juhee leans in close, a playful smile on her face as she wonders aloud. If the correction was so enjoyable, what would a reward feel like? His mind races, his heart hammering against his ribs. Juhee notices Jiwoo's improved skill, remarking that he seems better than last time. A deep blush creeps up his neck as he stammers, denying he practiced. But his mind flashes back to late nights spent studying, nervously searching online for ways to be a better partner and diligently following tutorials. He clenches his fist, thinking it was all worth it. Feeling a surge of confidence, he asks if they can continue. To his surprise, she calmly pulls out a soothing balm, explaining she'll apply some for him. She lifts his shirt and gently tends to the marks left upon him. Juhee's expression falls, a shadow of guilt crossing her features. Her mind flashes back to a night spent searching online, realizing that their intense sessions required a gentle follow-up. The thought stings her. She had been so focused on her own satisfaction that she neglected his well-being. Back in the present, she carefully tends to his skin. "I'm sorry," she murmurs, her voice sincere. "I should have done this from the start." She admits this is all new to her, too. Jiwoo looks at her, a deep blush on his face, his eyes soft with understanding. A playful glint enters Juhee's eyes as she asks if Jiwoo is still sensitive from their last encounter. Heat rushes to his face, and he stammers that he's fine, insisting he heals quickly. Her expression softens, and she tells him she'll be more careful, asking him to promise he'll always tell her if he's uncomfortable. He earnestly agrees. The tender moment shatters as she moves near him, her voice dropping to a low whisper. "You did great, so you deserve a reward." A powerful blush consumes Jiwoo as his mind races, wondering what she has in store. Juhee's expression is calm, almost thoughtful. "So what should I do for you?" she asks. Jiwoo jolts, a powerful blush instantly flooding his face. His heart hammers in his chest as he stammers in confusion. She shifts, moving to sit beside him, her presence overwhelming. Leaning in, she commands him, "Tell me what you want." Her voice is a soft murmur, promising anything he desires. Jiwoo's mind spins, unable to process the question. This is the reward? The sheer possibility of her offer leaves him breathless, unable to even imagine what he could ask for. Jiwoo's heart hammers against his ribs. He stammers, asking if she truly means he can ask for anything. Juhee confirms, so long as the request is within reason. A deep blush consumes Jiwoo's face. He sits on the edge of the bed, head bowed and hands clasped nervously in his lap. After a tense moment, he gathers all his courage, his voice barely a whisper. "Then would you maybe kiss me?" The simple, vulnerable request hangs in the air. Juhee's eyes widen, her confident expression faltering in surprise. Juhee doesn't answer with words. She moves, shifting closer to face him, her arms draping over his shoulders. Her mind drifts to their last, more frantic kiss, a clumsy and intense encounter. She wonders if that was his very first one. A thoughtful, almost sad expression crosses her face as she considers the possibility. Leaning forward, she closes the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a soft, deliberate kiss. The gentle connection deepens, a quiet answer to his vulnerable request as Jiwoo melts under her touch. The kiss deepens, soft and lingering. When they finally part, Jiwoo is breathless, a deep blush coloring his entire face. His heart hammers in his chest as he realizes this kiss felt entirely different from their last encounter. He can only manage a quiet, grateful "thank you." Suddenly, Juhee guides him back onto the bed, her shadow falling over his. She looks down at him, a knowing smirk on her lips as she questions if a kiss was all he truly wanted. "I don't buy that," she teases, her voice low and full of challenge. A playful smirk touches Juhee's lips as she looks down at Jiwoo. She offers him one more chance. His mind goes blank, his breath catching in his throat. Overwhelmed by the moment, he simply closes his eyes in surrender. "You have to lean in and respond properly," she whispers, her voice a soft command. Jiwoo nervously announces his departure, and Juhee's response is a simple, detached "fine." As he walks down the silent hallway, a heavy feeling settles in his chest. She didn't say a single word about their last encounter. He recalls her warm smile, wanting desperately to believe she felt the same joy he did. But the hope quickly dissolves into harsh reality. He tells himself it doesn't matter. She was clear about the nature of their arrangement from the start, and he agreed to it. Frustration washes over him for foolishly catching feelings. Jiwoo stops walking, his feet heavy in the silent hallway. Seeing Juhee act so normal confirms his fear. She doesn't feel the same way he does. But a defiant thought cuts through the sting of rejection. So what? He bites his lip, knowing he can't just let her go. A memory of their intense connection flashes in his mind, sending a deep warmth across his face. He convinces himself this is enough for now. Elsewhere, Juhee stands alone on a balcony, insisting she has thick skin and bounces back fast from any hurt. Juhee leans against the balcony railing, a wisp of smoke escaping her lips as a question surfaces in her mind. Is it fair to hurt Kwon Jiwoo just because he seems tough? She admits to herself she was worried he would bring up the events of their last day together. An image of him, tearful and questioning her motives, flashes in her thoughts, but she quickly dismisses it. That's not him. He's too timid to speak first. Frustrated, she runs a hand through her hair, realizing she let herself get careless because their time together felt too much like a date. Juhee collapses onto her bed, her mind replaying images of Kwon Jiwoo. She recalls the black shirt he wore, a small smile touching her lips as she thinks it looked good on him, though she regrets not getting a better look. A warmth spreads through her as she recalls his impressive build, her curiosity igniting. Questions pour into her mind, one after another. What does he do on his days off? Was he always so reserved? What kind of life has he lived? The mystery of Kwon Jiwoo deepens, pulling her in completely. Juhee collapses onto her bed, but her mind finds no rest. Thoughts of Kwon Jiwoo consume her entirely. She pictures him alone, his bangs shadowing his brow, but she remembers the piercing intensity in his eyes. A deep warmth spreads through her as her mind's eye traces the powerful lines of his physique, a sight she now regrets not appreciating more fully. A sly smile touches her lips. Next time, she promises herself, she'll get a much more thorough look. The idea creates an immediate, aching need to see him again. Juhee lies stretched out on her bed, the space around her feeling vast and empty. A single thought echoes in her mind. I miss him. Later, Kwon Jiwoo stands rigidly in her apartment, his face flushed as Juhee steps close. She lifts a hand, gently sweeping his dark bangs from his eyes, her touch making him flinch. Don't move, she commands softly, her palm resting on his broad shoulder. Just stay still. A breathless, okay, is all he can manage as her hand glides down to his back, exploring its strong shape. A warm blush spreads across Kwon Jiwoo's face as Juhee praises his white shirt, telling him how good it looks on him. He remembers she specifically chose it for him today. A teasing glint enters her eyes as she notes that this one is a bit sheer. Her palms press against his chest, the thin fabric stretching taut over his physique, making him flinch. Stepping back, Juhee sits on the edge of the bed, her gaze intense. Why don't you take it off? She commands softly, instructing him to undo the buttons one by one. His hands tremble as they rise to his collar, and he nervously agrees. It's not the first time, he thinks, yet he can't understand why he's so tense under her watchful eyes. Kwon Jiwoo's heart hammers against his ribs as his fingers tremble on the buttons of his shirt. Her intense gaze feels like a physical touch, making his skin burn. A button pops loose, and the fabric parts. The shirt falls away, pooling at his feet. Juhee watches, her expression unreadable. Remove the rest as well, she commands. He obeys without hesitation, his movements slow and deliberate under her unwavering stare. Now standing before her, he waits, feeling completely exposed as she silently takes in the sight of him. Her quiet command hangs in the air, let everything fall away. Kwon Jiwoo's final garments fall to the floor, leaving him completely vulnerable under her steady gaze. Heat rushes to his face as he stands before her, aware that only he is uncovered while she remains fully dressed. He instinctively moves to shield himself, but Juhee's voice stops him, a faint, knowing smile on her lips. She instructs him to put his hands behind his back and turn around slowly. A quiet yes is his only reply as he complies, his muscles tensing under her complete control. Juhee smothers a laugh, teasing Kwon Jiwoo about his obvious reaction. His face burns as he stammers that he's just embarrassed being the only one uncovered. Her playful expression hardens slightly. She reminds him that he's her loyal puppy, and puppies don't need clothes. Seeing that he isn't fully in the right mindset, she offers to help. A moment later, a sharp breath escapes Kwon Jiwoo as a novel sensation makes his body shudder. Now kneeling before her, his transformation is complete. Holding the tether, Juhee looks down at him, a satisfied smile on her face. It suits you, she says, her voice low. Way too well. Juhee gently strokes Kwon Jiwoo's head, admiring how the accessory she gave him matches his hair perfectly. He blushes under her touch. With a smirk, she holds up a small remote and mentions that the device she attached to him also pulses. She presses a button, and a sudden, intense sensation courses through Kwon Jiwoo's body. He lets out a sharp gasp, his muscles tensing as he tries to endure it. Overwhelmed, he collapses to the floor. Juhee looks down, calling him cute. Kwon Jiwoo can only tremble, stunned that she hasn't even turned the intensity halfway up. A satisfied smirk plays on Juhee's lips as she holds the tether, observing Kwon Jiwoo from above. The reason Kwon Jiwoo is so compliant isn't just about the tether and accessories. For hours earlier, a co-worker warns him about skipping another work dinner. Kwon Jiwoo agrees to go, planning to leave quickly, but soon finds himself 3 bottles deep. Flushed and hazy from the alcohol, his thoughts drift only to Juhee. He can't bear the thought of disappointing her. "I miss her," he whispers, a deep ache of longing settling in. He believes he has 2 hours to sober up, completely underestimating how much he has had to drink. The haze of alcohol leaves Kwon Jiwoo completely unguarded, trembling under a wave of overwhelming sensation. A deep flush spreads across his chest as he pants, his thoughts a desperate mantra for release. From her seat above him, Juhee looks down with a calm, knowing smile, the silken cord held loosely in her hand. "You got something to say?" she teases. He stammers, pleading to reach his release. Juhee slowly stands, her shadow falling over him. She muses, looking down at his upturned, desperate face. "It's a bit weird hearing you talk like this." Juhee's smirk is knowing as she gazes down at him. "So what now?" she asks, reminding him he must show true devotion to get what he wants. Kwon Jiwoo trembles, a deep flush of humiliation fighting against the overwhelming emotion coursing through him. He finally breaks. "I'm yours," he whispers, surrendering completely. Tears stream down his face as he repeats the words, his eyes pleading for relief. "Yes, I understand now," Juhee muses, a small smile playing on her lips. Kwon Jiwoo's cheeks are flushed as he hesitantly admits to drinking maybe 3 bottles. Juhee's mind races, not beer, but soju. She quietly considers this, recalling he becomes more pliant after drinking. A flicker of concern crosses her face. He shouldn't have pushed himself just for her. "No," Kwon Jiwoo protests, his voice earnest. He gazes up at her, desperate to make her understand. I wanted to." His words hang in the air. Juhee's expression softens, but she remains quiet. After a moment, she simply replies, "Yes, well." She turns away, leaving him as she sits at her desk. A heavy silence fills the room, broken only by the soft scratch of her pen on paper. Juhee sits at her desk, pen still, her mind drifting from her studies. A question has been forming, one she can no longer ignore. Why does Jiwoo go along with all my weird preferences? She thinks to herself. At first, she simply assumed he was like any other man who wouldn't turn down such an offer. But the more she learns about him, the clearer it becomes that he's different. Recalling his flushed, earnest expressions, a new understanding dawns on her. Kwon Jiwoo is not like most guys at all. Juhee's mind pieces it all together. It doesn't feel like Kwon Jiwoo is just fooling around. A warm, hazy memory of his blushing, eager face appears in her thoughts. It's more like he's doing all this simply because he enjoys spending time with her. A sudden, stunning realization sends a jolt through her chest, almost as if he's doing this because he likes her. She leans back, floored by the possibility, but her mind immediately tries to dismiss it. Impossible, she thinks. She considers herself selfish, someone who ignores things when they become inconvenient. And Kwon Jiwoo has seen that side of her time and time again. Juhee's mind races, filled with a storm of self-doubt. Why would he like someone as irresponsible as her? She tries to rationalize it, convincing herself he must be confusing their thrilling games for genuine feelings. Overwhelmed, she leans back in her chair, deciding to push the complicated thoughts away. It's far easier to believe he's just a nice guy playing along, because their unique dynamic simply suits him. She settles on a simple truth. Kwon Jiwoo is cute, and she enjoys their time together. For now, she won't stop this intoxicating game, even if it leads to future regret. Kwon Jiwoo sits on the edge of the bed, muscles tense with a quiet, eager anticipation. He loves that Juhee has been inviting him over more frequently and asked what she has planned for today. A playful smile touches Juhee's lips as she reveals a unique, delicate device. She holds it up for him to see, asking if he thinks he can handle it. Kwon Jiwoo's brow furrows in confusion until she cryptically explains its intended purpose. His eyes widen in sudden, shocked comprehension. A hot blush spreads rapidly across his face as the object begins to hum. Juhee calmly explains the purpose of the delicate item she holds. She reminds Kwon Jiwoo of their past discussions about unique experiences, now presenting an unconventional but direct path to a new sensation. A sly smile plays on her lips as she assures him he would definitely enjoy it. Kwon Jiwoo's face flushes a deep red, a shiver running through him as he processes her words. He recognizes that excited, confident glint in her eyes, the look she gets right before they push their boundaries. Finding her impossibly captivating, he lowers his gaze and gives a quiet, trembling yes. Juhee leans in close, her voice a low whisper as she asks Kwon Jiwoo how he thinks the new experience will feel. His face flushes a deep crimson as she lightly touches his chin with the cool, metallic device. He stammers, admitting his concern that it might be uncomfortable. Observing his undeniable physical reaction, Juhee simply smiles, noting that he seems excited already. She calmly prepares the delicate piece, assuring him to relax. He flinches, his breath catching as a strange, new sensation washes over him, leaving him wide-eyed and speechless. Kwon Jiwoo's mind races as he processes the unique, overwhelming feeling. It's not painful, just intensely strange. He can feel every subtle detail of the new sensation, and the slow, deliberate pace makes his heart pound. He gasps, begging her to wait. Juhee immediately stops and withdraws the delicate device, her expression turning to one of genuine concern. She asks if he is okay, explaining she was trying to be careful. Blushing, Kwon Jiwoo admits it didn't hurt. It just felt weird, quietly adding that she didn't have to stop so quickly. A deep blush spreads across Kwon Jiwoo's face as he shyly admits that even if he said stop, she could have just continued. Juhee offers to stop if it's too much, but he quickly shakes his head, insisting it was just a reflex and that he doesn't want to stop now. Juhee watches him for a long, quiet moment, a subtle shift in her expression. A knowing, almost gentle smile touches her lips as she leans in slightly. She asks him if he knows what a safe word is. Juhee asks if Kwon Jiwoo knows what a safe word is. A deep blush spreads across his face as he stammers that he doesn't. She explains they will make one now, a special word for when things become truly unbearable. She leans in until her lips are just beside his ear, the warmth of her breath on his skin. Her voice is a low whisper. If he truly can't take it anymore, she tells him to call out her name. She pulls back slightly, a confident smile on her lips. Sounds good? She asks, promising to stop immediately if he says it. Kwon Jiwoo's voice is a low whisper as he gives his promise. The realization hits him immediately. Any other plea, any other sign of his struggle will be ignored. His heart pounds in his chest, the frantic beat thrumming through his entire body. A hot flush spreads across his face as he questions the feeling. It isn't fear, he realizes, but a thrilling wave of pure anticipation. Watching his flustered acceptance, Juhee's lips curve into a knowing smile. She tells him that since he agreed, she is going to continue. A slow, steady pressure makes Kwon Jiwoo gasp, his eyes widening. A deep flush spreads across his face as he realizes she's taking things further than before, pushing past a limit into uncharted territory. His heart hammers against his ribs, breath catching in his throat. It's all the way there, Juhee says, her voice calm and steady. She watches him intently, asking if he can feel the sensation in his very sensitive state. Overwhelmed, Kwon Jiwoo can only stammer that he isn't sure, completely lost in the profound new feeling. Juhee observes the scene with a critical eye, noting that they'll need a different approach for their next session. Still, a faint smile touches her lips. She can see he's enjoying it. Her curiosity piqued, she begins to tap the object rhythmically. The unexpected motion sends a jolt through Kwon Jiwoo. He shudders as a strange tension builds deep inside him. You don't like that? She asks, her voice calm against his ragged breathing. Kwon Jiwoo stammers a denial, his body betraying him. Seeing his flustered state, she presses further, asking if he likes it. A powerful sensation builds inside Kwon Jiwoo, an overwhelming pressure that feels blocked, with no hope of release. He grits his teeth, whimpering that he can't handle it. As Juhee's touch shifts to a new method, he chokes out a desperate question, asking why she's there. She calmly explains that her first approach wasn't working, so she decided to try a different path. Suddenly, a second, intense pressure joins the first. He cries out, completely overwhelmed, begging her to stop. Her face remains impassive, utterly focused on his reaction. Juhee leans over Kwon Jiwoo, her gaze intense as she demands he be honest. She states it plainly, that he finds pleasure in this kind of experience. He looks up, confused and completely flustered. With a knowing smile, Juhee explains her reasoning. pointing out how his body betrays his words and how easily embarrassed he gets. The revelation hits Kwon Jiwoo with the force of a tidal wave. As his heart pounds in his chest, his mind races, questioning everything. His hand instinctively tightens around the smooth, delicate object in his grasp. Sweat beads on Kwon Jiwoo's brow, his face flushed with a deep, consuming heat. He stammers, desperately asking for a moment before admitting he needs a moment of release. Juhee watches him, her expression calm and her lips curled into a faint smile as she asks what about it. Her gaze intensifies as she pushes him. "Keep going," she urges softly. "Need to what?" The pressure overwhelms him, and tears stream down his cheeks. He covers his mouth, finally choking out the simple, private words she wants to hear, admitting his desperate need. A wave of immense relief washes over Kwon Jiwoo as Juhee calmly grants his request. "We'll go then," she says. "The quiet room it is." Extending a hand, Juhee tells him to take it, adding a soft warning to hold the item in his grasp securely so he doesn't trip. He obeys, and she leads him from the room. As they approach, however, confusion clouds his features. "Juhee," he stammers, his voice uncertain. Inside, she simply announces that she's coming in with him. Her hand rests gently on his back, guiding him forward. He turns, his expression a mix of surprise and submission, and asks, "But why?" Juhee calmly explains that the space is narrow, and she's worried he might miss his footing. Kwon Jiwoo protests, insisting he can manage just fine, but she reminds him it's his first time trying this. As they stand together, she presses close from behind, her touch intimate and profoundly distracting. She murmurs that with her so close, she worries focusing would be harder for him. The realization crashes over Kwon Jiwoo. She expects him to let go of all his tension like this. A wave of intense heat floods his face as he chokes out, "I can't." Kwon Jiwoo's body trembles against the tiled wall, his face burning with a deep flush. "Don't," he stammers, unable to meet her gaze. "It's too embarrassing." Juhee presses closer, her voice a low whisper against his ear. She tells him that hearing him say no in that tone only strengthens her resolve. As a tear escapes his eye, she reminds him of their deal. If he truly hates it, he just has to use the safe word. His heart hammers in the quiet room. Finally, he admits in a hushed, shaky voice, "I don't hate it." Juhee holds Kwon Jiwoo from behind. Her voice is soft, steady, "All right." A deep blush spreads across Jiwoo's face as his heart hammers against his ribs. He knows one word would be enough to make her stop, yet he finds he doesn't want her to. An overwhelming heat floods his senses as her touch is full. Leaning in, Juhee whispers reassuringly that it's okay, that this is just one of the things a dedicated guide does. Jiwoo's breath hitches. He thought he couldn't handle this, but now, a part of him wants more. Juhee holds Kwon Jiwoo firmly, questioning why he hesitates. She gives him quiet permission, telling him he can let go now. A deep blush covers Jiwoo's face as he whispers that he can't hold back anymore. A final tremor runs through him as he completely surrenders control, a warm sense of relief washing over him. Juhee smiles, her voice a low murmur as she notes he must have been waiting for a while. Overwhelmed by the intensity of his vulnerability, Jiwoo lets out a shaky breath, tears of pure emotion streaming down his face. After a moment of overwhelming relief, the intense heat settles into a quiet calm. Later, Kwon Jiwoo sits on the living room floor while Ji gently dries his hair from the couch behind him. A warm blush creeps up his neck. He feels like a well-cared-for companion, but he admits the sensation is nice. He watches her contented expression, thinking he always knew this side of her existed. As if reading his thoughts, Juhee leans in with a playful smile, teasing that he might be even more uniquely eccentric than she is. Juhee's smile widens, thoroughly amused by his reaction. Kwon Jiwoo freezes, a blush creeping up his neck as he stammers, completely caught off guard. She lets out a soft laugh, telling him his panicked expression is cute. Her gaze then drifts downward, her expression turning more thoughtful. Juhee admits she's been curious for a while, feeling she can finally ask him now. The light mood shifts as she looks at him, her voice quiet but direct, asking how he got the prominent scar on his arm. Kwon Jiwoo's fluster vanishes, replaced by a sudden, serious stillness. The warm, playful atmosphere vanishes in an instant. A tense silence fills the room as Kwon Jiwoo sits perfectly still, his head bowed low. Behind him, Juhee's eyes widen in sudden realization. She internally chides herself, wondering why she got carried away and crossed such a personal line. Her confident expression softens into one of genuine regret. "I'm sorry," she says, her voice quiet and sincere. "That was thoughtless of me." She quickly adds that he doesn't have to answer, but the question hangs heavily in the air between them. A wave of self-reproach washes over Juhee, who feels like a hypocrite for almost lecturing him on self-worth. The heavy silence breaks as Jiwoo, with his gaze averted, quietly confesses the scars are old, from a dark time when he struggled with deep emotional pain, leaving a permanent reminder on his skin. Juhee's expression softens with concern. She gently tells him she hopes he never finds himself in that place again. To her surprise, a faint, warm smile graces his lips as he agrees. His unexpected reaction puzzles her as vivid memories of their intense moments together flash through her mind, highlighting the irony. The apartment door clicks shut, and Jiwoo's strength gives out. He slides down to the floor, leaning his back against the cool surface as the evening's events wash over him. His mind races, replaying the raw vulnerability of his confession. He remembers the hopelessness that first led him to reveal his past and the indifference he had faced before. But Juhee's reaction was different. He feels a profound sense of relief, realizing she took his history better than he ever could have hoped, and he resolves to honor her wish and move forward. A full week crawls by, marked only by silence. Jiwoo sits alone, phone clutched in his hand, his heart hammering in his chest. He hasn't heard a single word from Juhee, and a cold dread begins to seep in. A bitter, self-loathing smirk tugs at his lips as he spirals, convinced he must have disgusted her with his confession. The hope he felt drains away, replaced by a deep, aching regret. Elsewhere, Juhee stands in quiet contemplation, her expression unreadable, her thoughts her own as the silence between them stretches on. Jiwoo sits on his bed, pushing back against the rising tide of doubt. He decides he can't just assume the worst. He has to ask her directly. His hand reaches for his phone, and a message appears on Juhee's screen as she rests. Her response is swift and simple. "You can come over." Now, standing in her apartment, the silence stretches between them. Jiwoo's voice is heavy with a week's worth of anxiety as he admits he thought she had gotten tired of him. He looks at her, his expression vulnerable, and quietly asks if she could keep calling him. Tears stream down Jiwoo's flushed face as he chokes out a desperate plea. He promises to do whatever Juhee tells him, even better than before, obeying every little thing. Overwhelmed, he calls himself a mess and apologizes for crying, explaining that just seeing her face makes him lose control. Juhee watches him, her expression unreadable. Before he can say more, she steps forward. In one fluid motion, she wraps an arm around his neck, pulling him into a small room. The door clicks shut, enveloping them in sudden privacy. Jiwoo clings to Juhee, burying his tear-streaked face in her shoulder as she calmly explains her absence. She was just swamped with school, studying, and cleaning up. "Don't cry," she whispers, reassuring him that her silence wasn't because she was tired of him. A wave of relief washes over him, so potent it quickly morphs into a hot flush of embarrassment. He pulls back abruptly, running a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry," he stammers, thinking about how foolish he must look. Juhee watches him, then quietly says she's going to head out. As Juhee turns to leave, Jiwoo's hand instinctively darts out, his fingers closing around the hem of her shirt. He can't let her go. She halts, looking back at him, and the air between them suddenly feels charged and warm. Breaking the tense silence, Juhee murmurs, "You're already here. Why don't you stay for dinner?" Soon, they sit across from each other, sharing a quiet meal. The atmosphere is thick until Juhee speaks, her eyes fixed on his hands. "You're really good at using chopsticks." Baffled, Jiwoo looks down, effortlessly pinching a single bean. A flush creeps up Juhee's neck as her chopsticks fail to grasp a slippery bean. Jiwoo gently asks if she's fumbling on purpose. "I'm not," she insists, flustered, explaining that the utensils are just hard to use. Instead of teasing, a soft, reassuring smile touches Jiwoo's lips. He tells her it's not a big deal. His calm kindness is a stark contrast to his earlier distress, and it disarms her completely. "I'm glad," she murmurs, a small smile of her own appearing, though she can't explain why. Juhee's gaze softens as she looks away, lost in thought. She admits to herself that she never wants to hurt his feelings, yet her actions often tell a different story. Jiwoo watches her, his gentle expression tinged with confusion at the sudden change in atmosphere. A quiet, wry laugh escapes Juhee's lips. She turns his earlier question back on him, her voice a low murmur, asking if perhaps he is the one acting on purpose. Before Kwon Jiwoo can process the words, her hand glides across the table, reaching for his face. His breath hitches in surprise. Juhee stands alone under a dark sky, her expression clouded with thought. A memory of a snowy day surfaces, of her standing before Kwon Jiwoo in a quiet park. She reflects that there was no need to console him, but she can't help herself when someone cries. Back in the present, she lifts a cigarette to her lips. The real reason she never called him back comes to mind. Her own careless question about his scars. The image of his pained face, flushed and streaked. With tears, flashes in her memory, and a heavy sigh escapes her. A blush of heat spreads across Juhee's cheeks as she thinks about Kwon Jiwoo. She can no longer deny it. He clearly likes her. The realization leaves her feeling conflicted, wondering what he expects her to do with his blatant feelings. Slumping to the ground, she questions why she ever started something she couldn't handle, blaming it on the thrill of the moment. She asks herself if she should end it all now, just because she feels guilty. But after a moment of heavy thought, she makes a decision. Reaching for her phone, she knows she has to contact him right now. A shadow of doubt crosses Juhee's face as she contemplates telling Kwon Jiwoo they should stop seeing each other. But what would happen then? Would they just go back to being strangers? She imagines his reaction, the pained look he might have. He was already so distressed after just a week of silence. The thought of inflicting that again makes her falter. She admits to herself that she just doesn't have the guts. Slumping down, she questions her own weakness, but a cold resolution soon settles in. She decides to stick to her original plan and tell him in advance, giving him time to prepare for the end. Juhee's gaze is heavy, her expression unreadable as she breaks the tense silence. "Start," she commands softly. Heat rushes to Kwon Jiwoo's face, his mind stumbling to catch up with her stunning order. "Hurry up," she adds. After a moment of panicked hesitation, he quietly asks if he should uncover himself. She leans in, whispering for him to do whatever he feels is right. Her cool indifference makes his heart hammer in his chest. "Face me," she orders. He immediately straightens, his body trembling with nervous anticipation as he obeys. Juhee's command hangs in the air. "What are you waiting for? Move to my rhythm." A deep blush floods Kwon Jiwoo's face as he hesitantly obeys, his mind reeling from the sheer audacity of her request. He can't believe this is happening. Juhee watches him with a cool, analytical gaze. "So this is how you show your devotion?" she asks softly. Her intense stare makes it impossible for him to focus. As she leans closer, her personal scent envelopes him, and a new thought cuts through the haze of embarrassment. He likes her smell. A sudden wave of heat crashes over Kwon Jiwoo, and the tension breaks in an uncontrolled release. Mortified, he can only stammer a frantic apology as he realizes he completely lost his composure. Unfazed, Juhee calmly wipes a stray tear of exertion from his cheek, her expression cool and curious. She leans in again, a sly smile playing on her lips as she teases him about his focus. Her touch reignites a sensitive spark within him, and she whispers a challenging question, asking if he's ready for another round. And that's where we'll leave them, for now. If this one hit you right, you already know the move. Tap subscribe. The next obsession drops twice a week, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. I pulled 2 more recaps just for you. They're on your screen right now. Pick your poison. This was Manhwa Dragon. Stay obsessed. I'll see you in the next one.